Okay, Rob and Diana, we're going to start with the basics. This is the backer rod. We have it in 4 sizes: 1 inch, 3/4, 1/2 inch, and right now the 2 inch is in the box here. We'll show you that. We have 30-ish so tubes of the chinking, all the same color. I'll show you how to load that in the gun here in a second. And here's a good wall for an example to see the various thicknesses we're doing. Gets pretty thick in spots where there used to be a knot, or where the bark is gone. It's getting really thick. And we also decided to do behind these window boards, which once it's stained will look pretty nifty. Here's a spot here where had to use quite a bit. So we got almost this whole section done. A little bit here by the stovepipe, and should have most of the parking lot side done by the end of the day. So there's a good view of it. And unfortunately, every section takes a different technique depending on the overhang. Like up here where the board overhangs, that's real easy. But if it has an underbite and the bottom board is on top, it takes a whole different technique. In case you're wondering, this piece here was done earlier and it's been stained. You can see it's a lot less obvious than these areas, which were just done this morning. We've also decided to use the 2-inch backer rod, which you can see up there, and chink on top of these windowsills, which are just wide open and letting water into the house. So I'll do a demo area of kind of a basic area and let you watch. But the things you need to do the chinking. Terry, you got a brush handy? You're going to need lots of rags, and you might want to bring up some more. These rags are almost like a t-shirt material, and they're working real well. You get a lot of use out of them. And I've had the best luck with these 1-inch paint brushes. If you had an A-frame ladder you can bring, that would be helpful, as well as a couple more step stools. Because working on the high areas is kind of a pain. So right now Terry just applied some, and she's in the smoothing process.
I sprayed it
and
first.
You spray it. As soon as you put it in a tube or a gap, you want to do a couple feet, and then you get it pretty darn wet, and then smooth it all out. And you want to be real conscious to get a good bond on the upper edge. That's where it's going to peel back and fill first, particularly down low close to the ground when it's going to be buried in snow all winter. So you want to run it up the wood 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch. As far as the depth of the chinking, you want it somewhere between 1/4 to 1/2 inch in depth this way, and you can go up to 5 inches in height, but we really don't have anything that tall. I don't think we even got 4 inches. This is about the widest as we're going to get. An area like this that has tar paper behind it, you really don't need to put backer rod. The tar paper is going to keep it there, keep the chink outwards. The backer rod is to keep the chink from falling into the wall cavity, basically. So on this one, you're going to want to fill this little gap, but you're going to start your first chinking bead about 1/4 inch down and kind of create a shelf. Do a bead over, and then ziggity zag all the way up to about 1/4 inch over this gap. And you puddle it all up, and then you're going to smooth it like Terry's doing here.
Yeah, and there's an air hole here. I'm just trying to fill in a little bit, but you have to clean this up real quick.
You want to check the work the next day, because oftentimes it'll shrink a little bit and pull away, and you want to just take the gun and inject a little into those holes. We're also going to do these horizontal spots as well when they're gapped open like that. So you can see here, this area had the backer rod. That's a 1 inch that was applied. And we put some here. Haven't got to it yet. We might even put a little more in there. And then we will fill up this whole cavity here with the 2-inch. So we're not wasting material. You want to fill an area that big. It's too much product. So let's pause this for a second and I'll show you how to do a nice easy area. So we have 2 of these guns. This one's empty. And the plunger, I call it, will tell you when it's starting to run out. Every squeeze you make, and here's your plunger release button. Every squeeze you make, it goes in. So as it works its way in, pushing all the material out. Once it's empty, you're going to pull this out and pull the tube out. This red one's kind of a pain in the butt. But get that out. It's empty. Throw it in the trash. And I'm going to show you from start. Now, I don't know why they didn't do it on this one, because every other cocking gun in America has a snipping hole to take off the tip.
So a new tube.
And I've been doing 2 snips. Just one is not enough. I mean, if you're going to do a hairline, it's okay. Let me. So I'll do 1, 2. Okay, and then you take the little poker rod that's built into the gun, and you're going to break the foil seal that's under this cap. And you want to do it at least 5 or 6 times to poke multiple holes. One hole, you're going to have a real hard time pushing it through. When you're done, clean that little thing off or it's going to build up. Drop the tube in. You can see it's hollow on the bottom. Drop the tube in, slide it in, and then as you start pumping the gun, it's going to start working its way up the schnozzle here. You can see it starting to come. So whenever you finish a line, before you pull it away, you have to release the pressure. Otherwise, the material is going to come out from a foot or more. So you're constantly releasing the pressure every time. If you just stall to scratch your nose or something, it's going to keep pumping out. So as you're applying it in the line, we're going to show you around the corner. You've got to be real consistent. It's almost like welding with how you apply the chinking. Otherwise, you're going to make a big mess and it's going to get all over the place. And you're going to waste all your time cleaning up. So, Terry, you take that one. This gun here, the red one, it has a better trigger action. It puts out more material, more consistent. So let's go over here, Paula. Hey Terry, will you grab that screwdriver that's hanging over there? Well, let's do this one right here. Come over here, Paula. This one's, you won't find one that's more consistent than this. It's nice and even all the way across. So we're going to use the skinniest 1/2-inch backing rod. Sometimes you can get it in with your fingers, other times you're going to have to use a screwdriver or butter knife or something, because you want it in there about 1/4 inch. Terry, did you find that screwdriver? You want to pause that?
It's on.
Okay, so we got the screwdriver, and you're going to push it in. In this case, we're going all the way to the tar paper. Don't be too violent with it because you can cut and destroy this stuff. It's on the delicate side. So kind of easiest to just stick it in there a little bit, hold it out, and then come back and work it in. I think you get the idea. So on this particular type of gap, we're going to put the chinking from about, I don't know, between 1/8 and 1/4 inch down, and let it run quite a bit. You don't want it super thin, just covering the backer rod. So, I'm gonna pause that.
All right, it's coming.
So right here we had a big gap next to the chimney, so we wanted to fill that in. Over here where we got the old concrete, that's okay. We could, for aesthetic reasons, put a little there, but there's concrete deep down in there, so we're not going to worry about that. I'll probably fill in this area a little bit. So this is loose. I'm going to start pumping it up. Sometimes it's just easier to push it forward. And start injecting it in. And you don't want to shoot it all the way back. Just give it a real light touch so that it's staying close to you. Yeah, here we go on the gap. You always use 2 hands. Sometimes you want to rest your arms on the wood or whatever's nearby, just so you're steady. These guns are kind of heavy, especially when the tube is full. So you want to watch that the material is moving ahead of you. That way you know you're filling the gap. If you're moving the gun so fast that you can't see it filling up, you're probably not getting enough in there. Hopefully you see what I'm talking about, where it's moving ahead of myself. And move at a pace to where you're, on a narrow one like this, it's easy to get enough in there to where it's touching both logs at the same time. I'll show you how to do a big wide opening in a little bit. So if you drag one finger on the board for stability, like I'm doing with my pinky, that helps too. And when you're on the ladder, this is even more fun, trying to stay stable, but practice makes perfect. Okay, so I'm done with this. Now I'm going to hit this breaker so it doesn't come out. When you're done with the gun, try and stand it up. If you hang it from the hook, like it's so convenient, you're going to lose a couple inches of this material as it comes out, especially when it's still real full. This one's got about 2 inches left to go, so there's less pressure on it. So stand it up. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to spray it. You can see you get pretty wet. See this area right here where I didn't get enough? I'm going to be conscious to push that in. These little foamers, you can use the side or the front depending on the width, but the side for a gap like this is just perfect. And you're just going to smush it in. And try and do long, continuous strokes for consistency, because you don't want to have to go back. See how I got that spot? You don't have to go back and clean up your stroke marks unless you have to. Periodically, you're going to have to grab a towel and clean off the excess that sticks to these. And then you can also use the tip to push it in. And we got 2 good examples. This wood here that's nice and dense with very little grooves is real easy to clean. This stuff here with all this, the material is going to get in here and you're going to waste all kinds of time trying to get it out. Fortunately, when it comes time to put the second coat of stain on, all the real light stuff that you left behind, you're not going to see it. If we want to look at these boards here as an example, these were done last week. You can see where there's some excess material there. We won't see that.
It'll get stained.
It'll get stained, it'll darken up. But again, these boards here that are dense with no grooves are real easy to clean up. So you just take a rag, put your finger through there and grab the rest of the rag so it's not rat tailing all over and getting into stuff. You're going to have some water drip, clean that up. And this is the most monotonous part. And unfortunately, you can only clean for an inch or two before it all wads up. And then you just take another spot and try and use the rags up to the point where you just don't have anything left, any clean spots. So you just run your finger a lot. You can see right there where I touched it and disrupted it. You can either go back with the sponge, or you can get your finger wet. This stuff's really sticky. It takes a long time to dry, days actually. But if you get your finger wet, you can run it along, kind of give it a wet willy here, and smooth that area out. Don't try that with a dry finger, you'll mess it all up. So again, take your towel, clean it up as best you can. But if we had all the time in the world, we could mask all this off and do a perfect job, but this material needs to be done in above 40 degrees, and here we are mid-August and we've got more than half the cabin to go. So you just got to be patient and put on your earbuds and rock out and go to town, but it's definitely not something you can speed your way through. Each line is different and presents its own challenges. But that's pretty good for that one. So let's go find a...
Do you want me to pause?
Yeah.
Now it's going.
We're going to do this area right here just as an example to show you how to stack up a large area. So you can see the backer rods in there. That's going to keep them from falling. And you're going to want to take wider trigger pulls, like a full pull. You can see how much material comes out of there. It's quite a bit. And you're going to do that initial bead, which is your shelf that you're going to build up on. And then we're going to come back, not pull quite as much. You don't want to overuse it. You got to bend over a lot to make sure you are getting it in there and that the material is touching the wood. So if you look at the plunger right now, you can see it's almost coming to an end.
Okay, let me look at it. You mean the hook part, right? The
That's the
horseshoe?
plunger.
Silver stick at the
Okay.
end, the hook.
That means you have to refill.
Yeah, there, it's all done. Last bit. So I'll show you how to smooth out a large area like that. And you don't want to really wait more than just a few minutes before you get to the smoothing process. It's just like silicone or latex or whatever else. It does start to harden up. If you goof and get distracted, put extra water on there. And so when you're doing a bigger area, you want to put a little more pressure and initially work out all these big lumps. And you're not going to get it perfectly flat, but because it's mimicking the wood, you know, you don't really want it perfect anyways. But push it in there, get it not, you know, as flat as possible. Make sure you're getting it up here into the contact with the wood, the upper board. And this one, it's kind of falling away behind there, so I might need to come back and add a little more on that top edge. And you can come back the next day. You always want to check all your lines, you know, about 24 hours later after a lot of the drying's occurred, and go fill up anywhere that is pulled away. And just use a fine tip on the gun and slowly squirt it into that hole. So we'll clean her up. And one like this, again, this top board, nice and easy, smooth. But then on the bottom, because it's got a lot of grain and cracks or whatever you want to call them, it's going to be tougher. You're not going to get it all out, and you'll see a little bit of a smear. But as it dries, it's less obvious. I think this is a rag we were using yesterday, so it's got a lot of old chinking on there. And then come back and fix where you touched it in the cleaning process. And sometimes these edges on here that aren't quite right, so you'll use your fingers. Remember to get your fingers wet. When you set these things down, which you're going to do it 10,000 times a day, try and set it in a spot where it's not going to leave something for you to clean up later. When you're doing these big areas, and you can see Paula will pan this way, this one's going to go all the way over here. I'm going to fill up this gap here with some of the 2-inch, and it'll be kind of flush. If you go look at the side of that first window there, you can give them an example of what it'll look like.
I'll go there now. That's what it'll look like afterwards, next to the window.
Here's a good example of an area that if you don't put back a rod, you're going to fill the whole gap behind there. So you're going to have to cram it in there. And you're going to want to start with narrow over here, the 1/2 inch, and then work your way up to the 1 inch, fill that up. Here's a good example of no backer rod being needed. Maybe a little bit right in here, a little bit there, a lot here. You have a hard time getting any in there, but and then you got areas like here that's just super tight. That presents its own challenge.
Do you need? You don't
So
need back
let's
rod.
look at this area here where Terry's putting it on over 1 inch. You got to get it thicker than that. This should be pushed in more. So really all she's doing at this point is painting the backer rod. So that never got pushed in. So probably have to start over. There's some backer rod there, but this whole thing should be further in. For this stuff to work and last through the winter, it's got to have some body to it.
The chinking.
The chinking does. If it's just paper thin like paint, it's not going to do a thing. So when you have that big gap under there, it's challenging. And in some places, we put the spray foam out of the can. We have one can here, Rob, but you might want to bring up another. There, like that, you could have probably would have been good to put some of that spray foam in there, which expands out. Don't over apply it. That stuff grows for hours, and you'll spend more time cleaning up that damn stuff.
But if it's in a big cavity, it'll grow in there.
So what I'll do on this one is I'll bring, like Terry did, I'll bring the chinking all the way to this outer edge so that it has some body to it. Because if I push this in any further, it's going to fall back in there. So in this case, we're going to use a little more than ideal, but it'll have a lot of strength. All right.
Pause?
Huh?
Should I pause?
Yeah.
Right now.
So Rob, if you could replace these boards here, particularly on these two parking lot windows that are just tortured. This one got replaced, so you want to use whatever that is, a 1 inch thick by, this one's a little wider, maybe 5 or 6 inch. So just unscrew these, pry these off, put some fresh wood. The window over there is in really bad shape.
Maybe these pieces too.
If you wanted to do these two, the ones that are got more
On the
nails
frame.
and wood, that'd probably be a good idea. The rest of this is okay.
Mikey, right here is not okay, but
That's the whole thing, so
I
I'm
know.
not going to mess with that right
okay.
now. But these all need to go because they're just falling apart. So that's a good day's project for you.
With good screws.
Yeah, you want to use modern screws, not these old coarse threaded flatheads. They're
Okay.
antiques.
All right.
All right, well, watch that video. Give me a call if you have any more questions about the chinking process. If you're going to save a tube overnight, just wipe off what's on the tip. It doesn't harden up overnight. This stuff actually takes, it seems like a week to cure. And one thing you can do is come back a little later, and if you see some funny spots, once it's hardened up a little bit, you can actually press on it and get rid of some lumps, and like right here where there's a big groove, you can fix some of that. I did this one earlier this morning and just smooth it out, make it a little more,
Like Play-Doh.
yeah, very much like Play-Doh, but tread lightly there. You could easily stick your finger all the way through there. This spot here, we did this, I don't know, 3 weeks ago. You can see it's, the only reason it's flexing is because there's tar paper behind there. But that's,
It's harder than
yeah, it's
Play-Doh.
really tough. Anyhow, once it's all stained, you probably won't even notice it. It's going to look pretty darn good and keep the elements and
Animals.
buggies out of there for the most part. We're not going to do the first log there. It's all rotted out. Rob or Diana, if you wanted to, where this haunted house looking tar paper's on there, if you want to bring up some nice shop box knives and just cut that stuff out of there so it looks better. But we removed all these rocks because they were letting leaves and pine cones and everything sit on the wood forever. and it caused all the wood to rot. So we pulled the rocks over, and Terry and I were talking about maybe planting some bushes in here to hide that, but these things aren't holding the house up anymore anyways. There's tons of posts and piers underneath, and they're just there.
And that gap doesn't go into the cabin area,
that's
just under the house.
It goes underneath, and you're not going to keep all them chipmunks from crawling around under there anyways. But we'll figure out how to make that look better at some other point. But we could pull them out, and the house isn't going to roll down the hill.
All right. I'm going to pause it. Call Mike if you have any questions.